Hey there, welcome to the Reinsurance Podcast, the place where we dive into all things reinsurance, the coolest part of insurance. We're your hosts, Jerad and Ben, a couple of ex-practitioners who loved the industry so much we founded Supercede to tackle some of its biggest headaches. And we're here to share our insights and stories with expert guests as we uncover what's really going on in the industry. We're joined once again by the fabulous, the voice of insurance, Mark Geoghegan. Welcome, sir.
Well, thanks for having me back. I was just thinking it was about 2 years ago, wasn't it?
You were our 15th episode and one of our first guests.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed it, so I'm really glad. I bumped into you, I think, one of those pre-Christmas drinks that people have, and now it's February, so yeah, things take a few months to get diaries all organised. I know you're incredibly busy flying around the world saving the world from itself.
But in recognition of that, I'm bringing you a gift today. This is the first gift exchange on the podcast, but
exchange with me. No, you should have told me if I'd known we were going to have a gift exchange, and I should have brought you some Voice of Insurance merchandise.
So Cordy, the producer of the podcast and our fabulous head of marketing, has produced a reinsurance version of Top Trumps.
Oh yes.
So this, sir, is a delight. But I'll give that to you.
Oh wow!
But we were playing it. We brought it out for some other clients and things.
Running jokes on the insurance. Remember? Well, the second Gulf War, there was the Axis of Evil.
Yeah,
wasn't there? Was it playing cards? Was it George W? Did he have some playing cards or not really? And obviously, Saddam Hussein was sort of the ace of spades, and we used to sort of have our own jokes about that on the newsletter. Sort of, who were the big cheeses within the industry? Like, how do you interview all of them? Had you interviewed all three Greenbergs? Have a special badge.
Checked all the boxes.
So well, I'm looking forward to obviously, if we run out of things to talk about, I'm going to start playing with the cards and get them out.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the deep reinsurance version of Top Trumps, which we've had to name Trump cards to avoid getting sued by whomever owns Top Trumps. I don't know.
Well, maybe Trump will sue you.
Yeah, exactly.
Gee, yeah.
He's a man who loves litigation, anyway.
Certainly, yeah. Well, I don't know if he loves it, but he just seems to do a lot of it.
He's very active in it, regardless.
I do have a bone to pick with you, Jed, because I've done now nearly 100 episodes with you, and I've
never brought you a
gift.
No,
it's true that Mark has done double that. On the Voice of Insurance, but still.
Yeah. But I'm scouring all the jumper shops in Shropshire looking for the perfect gift for you, Ben. So one day.
Yeah, Ben, you seem to. Is that a Guernsey sweater? I think we used to describe that. Yeah, very very tight knit, very warm.
I'm bringing Guernsey back on a loose reinsurance affiliation.
Well, I know it's a very good captive domicile, I believe, and from many other things, and good for ILS, I think, as well.
Yeah,
quite so.
But amazing tangent to start off this episode with. But thank you for coming back on the show. What we wanted to dive into, one is sort of updates on the Voice of Insurance and all the amazing guests that you're bringing on there, but also sort of get your sense as to what's happening in the market right now. I think amongst the sort of active journalists and yourself on the podcast, there's a ton of insight you're capturing around the space. We can sort of meander through what's happening in the space. But let's start with the podcast. How is...
Oh, well, the podcast, I mean, there's nothing to report other than it just keeps going. Well, it's a bit like, I think you all know about it, wouldn't you? I think sometimes people ask about, you say, well, what's the great idea, or what do you have to do to succeed? In so many things, people think, you have to have this brilliant idea, you have to have an alignment of all these stars and all these places and the right opportunity with the right backing, with the right person. And actually, sometimes it's not really true at all. What you need is stamina. You just need to keep doing things and maybe keep believing in it. And the good thing about the digital world is you can see that if you got 200 downloads on the first one, and 250 on the second one, and 300 on the third one, and then it was maybe on a plateau at about 550, and then 600, 700. But now I'm on about 1850. Because obviously, I'm not to say obsess about my statistics, but of course, on a Monday morning you have a quick look and see what. They're also available. It's so hard not to look at your stats, and you go, well, that's really good. And then the top episode I had so far had over 5,000 out of that, and then I'm very confident we're going to go through 500,000 downloads. It's really really good, and it's nice when you see the physical feedback, and it's good, and also I get so much more incoming. traffic now. So obviously when you're starting something, you have to say, hey, please come on this podcast. And then the person says, hey, what's a podcast? And then blah, blah, blah. And eventually, and now everyone knows what a podcast is. And they probably started, even the over 50s in our industry, and a lot of those people who are probably in this pack of cards, they actually have got into podcasts themselves. So it's self-fulfilling. So I get a lot more incoming, which is great. So that people know that this is a place where they can come and talk about insurance and reinsurance and stuff. And it will probably be a reasonably okay experience. And then when they've actually been on the show once, that's great, because then they get the far more important than any statistics or anything. There's always that moment of validation, isn't it? When someone that you know and you didn't know that they listened to podcasts said, hey, I just heard you on the podcast. It was really good. Yeah. Excellent. And for them, suddenly the little light bulb goes on. It's like validation. They know that podcasts are okay, and this is another one of the media things they can do. And if they do it with me, they think, oh, it's not a bad experience. Yeah. I'm not a horrible person. I don't stitch them up and ruin their lives or sort of, kind of end their careers by coming on the show. It's not like that at all. And they can come and talk. And so I get people coming back on, which is nice, sort of maybe once a year or within a certain reasonable rhythm, sort of 18 months or 2 years. Yeah. If they're sort of in that pack of cards, then they should come on. And it's nice that they want to, that there's a good coalition of willing people who do want to come on. And then I can make it work commercially as well, that's also pretty important, isn't it? If you can have a lot of fun doing things, but for me, obviously, I have to make a living doing it. And I have been able to make a living doing it, which is fantastic, because, it's a great benefit of the digital age, isn't it? You can actually do it. You can be your own boss. Yeah. And you can do something you enjoy and just talk for a living most of the time.
Content is king and all that. You mentioned people discovering your podcast and sort of being, I've certainly had this experience where they seem surprised that it was good, and you're like, oh, well, thanks. But do you also get any lay listeners, like friends outside of this world, who occasionally listen, and you're like, oh, that's
it's the classic sort of Sunday afternoon at the family. Sunday afternoon at the family gathering. So Mark, what do you do now? Whereas before, when you said you're editor of a magazine, they kind of get it. You could physically pick it up. Well, you probably can't very much anymore, but back in the old days, I could show them a copy of it and say, this is what I do. And then now it's sort of, I do a podcast, and it's all about insurance, so you probably wouldn't want to listen to it. It's on your phone. I can show you where it is. But actually, the good thing about having some sponsored episodes, which is great for obviously being able to do this for a living, I've got sponsored episodes, and obviously you came on a sponsored episode, which is incredibly kind of you, especially it was quite early in my journey. It was, helpful to to keep me going. So there's one, for example, that I did with a company that has satellites everywhere, and that is really, really useful, because it's just pure sort of science fiction, apart from its science. Fact, and then that's really, really good. So I can point that to lay people and say, well, listen to this. This is actually not about insurance, really. It's about how you can measure things from space and down to the last millimeter, and that these things are all possible. And obviously, we're trying to push it back into the insurance industry. But you can do something about that. Or I did something through one of the sponsors, that they sponsored the Soldiers charity, and. Very cool. Yeah, and it was about pain management. It was about some people who benefited from obviously the charity had backed them. They'd got into chronic pain after their military careers, and I ended up doing a podcast with them, and that was really hard. That was on emotional. We don't normally get to the point where people might start crying on a reinsurance podcast. I mean, they maybe feel like crying. But that was. That's really real, really different. So you can always point people to slightly. It's good. You can always do something slightly different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and you also get it where you've had some amazing guests on the show, but as well as once you start to show that sort of level of credentials, other guests are more comfortable coming on as well. They've seen, the Paul Brands and the Rod Foxes and all the CEOs across the industry have come on. It makes it much easier to sell someone else to come on, because their peer group is there, right? So that's always helpful.
The Hollywood producer cruising down Sunset Boulevard on the mobile phone to the head of the studio saying, it's a great script. We've got it. We've got the script. And who's in it? Well, Julia Roberts said she's in it. Oh, that means George Clooney will do the other part. Because you can kind of sort of bullshit your way to getting everyone in. But once it's good, once they know, once they've dipped their toe in and it's fine, then it just takes time. So I'm at a good place now where I don't have to spend so much time promoting the podcast or explaining to people what it is, and people are coming to me and asking me to do stuff, and then do more development stuff as well, which is good fun.
For sure. So what is sort of the sort of lineup coming up for the next sort of few months for you, and what are the sort of topics that people are wanting to talk about? Because it's a bit more focused around, you're working with, let's say, the Howden Tiger team, and it's here's what they want to talk about, here's the message they want to convey to the market. So I think gives a really interesting lens into what's on the top of the minds of executives in our industry.
Well, I think you're in the right space because everyone wants to talk about data and AI and ingesting data and doing clever things with it, and then spitting out the other end to their reinsurers or to their other stakeholders, and incorporating data from all over the place and making it sit in a nice place and be counted and understood, and then have insights drawn from it. So, I mean, everyone will want to talk about that. In fact, I'm going to get Hiscox have that announcement just before Christmas about really incorporating AI into everybody's work, into everybody's workflow, but also including, it was quite the intriguing word was that that they wanted to include it for lead underwriting, whereas up until now we've been talking about enhancing underwriting or something like key, obviously, which would be follow underwriting and saying yes or no, this is okay. This would be, putting your own price and saying, I do this under these circumstances, and then it's kind of sticking your neck out. So I'm going to get Kate Markham, who is charged of that part of Hiscox, that's going to be adopting that, to talk about that very specifically. Obviously, we'll talk about the market. Yeah, of course. But we could do anything on data right now, I think. I mean, everyone wants to talk about it. And I suppose, I've always got my 20 questions, which are going to be, and let's say 17 of them are specifically about that company or about the markets it's in and its strategy within that market that it's in and what it's going to do. But then you've always got your sort of residual, what are the popular topics of the day? And maybe 3 years ago would have been ESG, D&I or whatever. And this, obviously, since about spring last year, when ChatGPT exploded onto the whole world and into the public consciousness and the general consciousness. Obviously, it's probably been on a lot of other people's consciousness. I'm sure it's been in your high-level consciousnesses for a very long time before that. But that has to be added on to complete the set of the 20 questions. Oh, yeah, well, let's talk a bit about AI, or what are you doing about AI, or what are you doing about this kind of stuff? It's the question at the bottom that we've got. It's like, what's your view on this? And that's the one that if I didn't put it on, I'm sure the marketing team or the public relations team would want to put it on.
Yeah. Do you think you're having, by running those kind of conversations at a very high level, you're having a bit of a pull factor towards getting some executives to kick into action on some of these topics? Because you're there talking to a CEO, an insurance CEO, about AI, and making all these other insurance CEOs think, oh goodness, what are we doing about AI? Are we at least doing something data? Or,
there's certainly a responsibility of the media is for spreading, hype. Obviously, hype is one thing, but also about spreading that idea. So yes, it does focus the mind of a CEO, particularly if they hadn't thought about it before. If I send them the questions a few days before and it's got AI, and it's like, oh God, what is our view on AI? What are we doing about AI? I don't know. I mean, I'm very busy making lots of money in the hard market, but I might want to have so it does put the agenda that the fourth estate does help set the agenda, and it helps spread that agenda around. And it makes people think, I do need to have something to say because I know he's going to ask me about AI. So what is our view on AI? So let's have a proper think about it if we hadn't already had a think about it.
Have you had anybody come on and say, or privately, not to name them, but have you had anybody say, actually, you know what, we're just going to ignore that?
Actually, there's a few who say, you know what, I'd rather not talk about that. It's not really our thing. We're market people. We just want to crack on with it, and we'll let the tech people do it, help enable our job better. But they'll have to come and show me how it works. Because I'm so busy. It's a bit like that old cartoon, though. Sometimes. The famous cartoon, the sort of IT cartoon, is the four cavemen are pushing this, trying to push a truck, a little cart, but it's got square wheels. And the IT person, the clever boffin person standing at the side of the road, showing them this beautiful wheel, like, lovely, look, the round thing is going to work really well. And this is like, go away, we're too busy. We're far too busy now. We're busy just dragging this stupid cart around. But also, I think it has that other effect though as well, that you can force people to make up policy on the hoof a bit. and people say a lot of bullshit about technology because they think, oh God, I better say something. So yeah, we're incorporating technology in everything we do. I could have probably got that quote out of any CEO over the last 25 years because of course it's a good thing and we're doing lots of it. And then let's not talk about any more specifics because I don't know anymore.
It probably doesn't work now, but you could have just dropped again and again. So are you now an insurance company or a technology company? It's like, I don't want to say the wrong one. So probably a lot of people. I think we've moved on from that a bit nowadays. I think insurers are beginning to recognise a bit more that they've got a role to play that can be enhanced. But we did go through a period where data and technology company was the new identity of lots of brokers and insurers.
Yes, I don't think anyone really wants to say that anymore. I mean, I think some of the insurtechs are a bit desperate about, they've got to put AI something in there, and they've got to put or whatever embedded insurance. Again, I don't really know why people are getting excited about that. Obviously, if there's a difference between getting funded and not, then fine. But I don't really care what embedded insurance is. Yeah. I've had some far older players in embedded insurance who've been doing it for 40, 50 years on the show, and have had some very, very new ones, a company like Uptake, who've got some really impressive numbers. But actually, in the end, you still have to treat the customer really fairly, and you've got to give them a good deal. So if you think you're going to sort of find, there is no clever way of doing this. You can make insurance easier to transact, but you better treat that person fairly. You better not rip them off, and you better not sort of hook them into something that's unfair, because anyway, the regulator's going to be all over you in the end. And when you're talking about embedding things, generally that's at a consumer end where that you need to embed the protection while you're doing it. So I'm always a little bit wary about that kind of stuff. But I don't know about you and I. Whenever you're buying insurance at the point of sale, it's often so bad. Obviously, because we all know about, I just come back from a week in the Canary Islands, the classic, pick up the car. It's £100 car hire because it's a tiny island. You can't drive very far. So, you can't do much mileage unless you just drove around the island. So, it's cheap car hire. But then, £100 for the car hire. But what about £100 to remove that €900 deductible down to zero? It's like, why don't you get lost? Why don't you be nice? Why don't you be nice to me? Just give me, treat me fairly. Yes, but that's embedded insurance, isn't it? But it's not very nice, and it's not good insurance, and it doesn't allow you to find competing options. So I must say, some of the things I'm wary about, or when they're buzzwords, so, well, why do you want to embed insurance? Why don't you let people maybe think carefully about it before they buy it?
This idea of, especially in our industry, this usage of buzzwords for the sake of buzzwords oftentimes, you mentioned earlier, like the increase in discussions around AI and discussions around how people are utilizing data more. From your sort of sense of it, having talked to a ton of the executives around the industry, is this becoming something that's real, or is this still people sort of playing lip service to an idea of like, let's talk about all the stuff we're doing here, but in sort of reality, it's like it's not actually moving underneath the surface? Or what is your sentiment?
Well, it has to be real, because at some moment, the London market is going to switch off the old mainframe system in a few months' time. Maybe there'll be a delay, maybe not. But billions of pounds, dollars and euros and yen are going to have to find a home, and it better work. And that's going to be on the basis of a far more digital experience than it was before, based around digital, centrally designed digital standards. And that is actually going to happen for the first time in my life. The last big bang was whatever in the late 60s, when we finally got those mainframes. And now we're finally going to switch them off, and then that is going to enable all this stuff to happen. But you're all part of this. People I have on the show, but obviously I've got a big sponsor in Advantage Go, and they do core systems. But they're building an ecosystem, and with a lot of their competitors are in it, and that's really, really encouraging, because they realize you can't do everything. And of course, if you want Viper are really good at ingesting bordereaux, you are really good at doing other things. So but if you don't have that common currency of the kind of, I always talk about the JPEG, because it was the Joint Picture Engineering Group, because when digital imagery came out, first I think Kodak they certainly had their own formats, and then I'm sure Fuji had their own formats back in the day, and all these different makers, I'm sure Nikon and whatever had their own formats, and they will realise it's a bit pointless. It's taking a picture if you can't send it to anyone, unless it was only Nikon people. Maybe, if we dominated the whole world, they realised it wouldn't work. Yeah. So they formed a joint picture engineering group to make some basic data standards to say what is a digital picture, what does it need to have in it, and then we're still using them. Yeah. And then they had MPEGs, which were moving picture engineering groups, and let's send videos to each other. And without that, you wouldn't have, social media and TikTok and whatever else. Yeah. So now that we're finally getting a kind of JPEG for insurance, one that we can all just fire around to each other, that's going to be really, really helpful, surely, because we simply didn't have it before. And everybody talked about it. It was only when you interrogated it that you realised this is all they're all trying to make these monopolistic systems where like, hey, I've invented the telephone. Great. Well, who do I phone? Well, I can't phone anyone at the moment because I've only got one. Or I've got one. I can phone someone in the next room. But eventually, and then you realise that it'd be nice to have a universal format for telephony so that it doesn't matter what phone you've got, so that you can receive a call from other people. And then let's do that in insurance. Once we do, it seems that at least the London market is creating some of those. Well, the Accord has been doing these standards for a really long time. The London market's adopting those standards. Then we can globalise that standard incredibly. It should globalise incredibly quickly, and then we'll see the benefits. It'll be fantastic, and it'll be really good for you guys and for everybody else, because you're trying to do the difficult things, but it's going to make at least corralling that data so much more easy.
It's interesting, isn't it? I was thinking about this the other day in our space, because we've seen so many different areas where this getting to JPEG, let's call it that, as you said, has been more challenging for us, it seems, than for other industries. Like, we just haven't quite gotten there. Despite some really promising efforts in things like catastrophe modelling in our space, one of the things we come up against all the time that we're helping out with is what an outward submission pack should look like if you're buying reinsurance. That's just, reinsurers get all sorts of random things sent to them. And then similarly, as you said, even with the Accord standards having been established for a long time, it's been, quite a gradual adoption by the major players first, and then trying to spread that worldwide. And similarly, and I sometimes wonder, will we see other effects where just after a while some collaboration fails and something else happens instead? Like we saw WhatsApp, as a messenger. Like, most people have WhatsApp now because WhatsApp didn't talk to the other WhatsApps that were out there. So in the end, everybody sort of went onto one. Similarly, we ended up leaning too heavily into Meta now, but Facebook, again, we didn't have, you could just mix and match. There were all sorts of these systems designed to prevent multi-homing between different platforms until a winner emerged. Do you see a collaboration that's finally going to succeed in London? You mentioned you've been waiting your whole career to get people off mainframes, pretty much, and now maybe
it would be nice, wouldn't it? I don't know. Let's just wait and see. And I'm pretty sure I've always been very optimistic, but I've been proven wrong so many times. It's really depressing. But I don't think you can beat the optimist out of me. That it's so obviously the right thing to do, and because we'll be creating so many new fantastic opportunities and so many new careers, and improve what we're doing and improve the value of what we're doing. So we just have a better product that's better focused, better priced. And more of it goes to doing what it says on the tin, i.e., with the competition, we'll just reduce the expense ratio, which we really need to reduce. You can't have 30-something expense ratio. It's wrong. It's not optimal, is it? It'd be better if it was 1%, and we did 1,000 times more insurance. That would be really good. And then more people could afford insurance if more of it went on the loss ratio than on the expense ratio. And so it'll just be good. We'll sell more of a good product, and the better product that's better focus in the long run, and it'll do what it says on the tin, rather than sort of cause problems half the time when you end up with these products that only have a 5% loss ratio because someone's been very clever, but they haven't actually done enough insuring. The more if you actually insure things, people will actually like that. It's a very good product. It's a morally good product, and it's a thing that we all need. So.
Now we're getting to the root of the purpose of our industry. And
well, it is a moral industry. There's plenty of immoral people in it, but and plenty of greed. And sometimes the greed can be good. Sort of go back to the kind of Wall Street speech, but actually, it's full of good. It fundamentally does good things, doesn't it? Fixes your house.
No, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if, and we think about this sort of emergence of at least some baseline of standards as a way to sort of raise the tide that will raise all the ships. Because in many ways you can still have innovation on top of that, but it means like there's the default new level of standard that exists. It's like if you take a picture on your iPhone, it's like an HEIC format or similar. But if you want to share it to someone, it converts it to JPEGs. And it's like you have these sorts of things where if it's to other iPhones, you can, hold it and it's animated for a stint, or you can like select someone, it can pull that character out of there's things that are benefited in that format. But if I just ping it to someone in an email, they can open it in any other format. So I think you might see something similar where now that we get the baseline established, you might have more insights with certain trading partners than others, but at least everyone gets baseline version, which we still have yet to really have.
Or you can have whichever version that you can deal with. If you want the really HD, granular, fantastic version, just take a bit longer to download it and make sure you've got the way of understanding that other format. And it's almost everyone should be sort of happily giving each other the format that they can best deal with at whatever stage of development they're in.
Yep.
Yeah.
That would. Yeah. Well, it's the way things work. The way things have worked digitally. Things have developed so much that that the way that a website it knows what kind of device you're using. It reformats it. Oh, I'm looking on my phone. Now I'm on a tablet. Now on my desktop. There are 3 different versions of the same site, but it knows to present the right one to you. There's no reason why you shouldn't have that with insurance to say, oh, well, I'm sending this to Swiss Re. Well, they can deal with everything. They've got fantastic tech. It's going to give me they can have the full, absolute granular whatever, but it's all there and all available. And I'm just opening myself to them.
Yeah.
And saying, you can come and have a look at whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I was thinking, it seems like some of these things we've got really, really successfully ahead with, and others. We went to a conference the other day and I had to send in my slides. And that still hasn't been resolved, right? We haven't ended up on a universal, system. We use Google Slides a lot in our firm because you have people using different. Jerad's got a Mac and I do not have a Mac, for example, and so you don't actually use Keynote anymore. But some people still use Keynote. Yeah. Some people use PowerPoint.
Oh I remember somebody submitting. Because when you're a conference organizer, you get that. It's like, Keynote? What's Keynote? Because we're all using PC. It's like, but it was fine. So you had somebody fixed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was always a bit of a pain.
Maybe some of these will always remain the great unresolved thing. But it leaves them to compete to get better and better, I guess. And there's some compatibility and shareability still.
No, for sure. Are you seeing from the executives the sentiment in the industry being that, because you mentioned the protection gap as well, and us being able to introduce better products to consumers and better pricing and more fair and reach a wider audience, is the sort of broader ambition that the data will allow that to happen, or are they thinking about it from improving profitability, or are they thinking about it from getting better sort of results on the street because their performance has improved, or are they having the conversation of, we'd like our results to stay flat, but do more for more people? How are they kind of communicating that to you?
Well, I suppose they would always want to be able to say we can share all this together, can't we? I can improve my earnings per share, and I can increase my dividends and increase the book value of my company, and hopefully increase the multiple at which the multiple of the book value at which that company trades on the stock exchange. Great, and so I can become wealthy. But at the same time as producing a better value product, which has a higher loss ratio with lower expenses. No, there's no reason why you can't do all of those things, especially if and the way that the nature of a competitive market is that you should be able to do all those things. But obviously you can't keep too much of the profit for yourself. You've got to share that. You're going to have to compete that away at some point anyway, and you've got to keep reinvesting in what you're doing. So no, people. I think the people who get it really do get it and are genuinely excited about it.
Yeah,
I think you've definitely seen you mentioned ESG having been around for a while now as a topic, but certainly a lot of conversations we have with various people around the industry are more and more aware of sentiment at all levels of an insurance business, in the sense of who do you want to buy insurance from, especially consumers or those that have a lot of oversight required over who they're working with, and then also who do you want to be a shareholder in at the same time. So you have like a double whammy. Maybe I'm a shareholder in AXA because I like their eco policies, but I also buy my insurance from AXA because I like their eco policies. And so you almost create a mega mutual out of people being both
Well, it's a
owners
virtuous
and
thing.
policyholders.
Being good is good for business, probably. It should be, anyway, being known to be good and being genuinely actually being good.
Yeah.
Actually, on that subject, I'm going to get Keita is a new one of the Lloyd's Lab cohort graduates, and get them on the show finally. I've been trying to get them on because I went to see them at the Lloyd's Lab about 18 months ago, I think, when they first sort of got into the Lloyd's Lab accelerator program. They just put a report out as well, which reminded me, which is great because I'm just about to send them the questions, which is good. So I'll just have to read this report and come up with all the questions. But if you're looking at, if someone's asking you, what's the next cyber? What's the next $20-30 billion market with the potential of becoming a $100 billion market over a career span?
Yeah.
If my 22-year-old son said, well, what insurance should I get into, Dad? Well, cyber's doing pretty well, and it probably still will do. But actually, you know what? If you're really smart, what about carbon insurance? It's really, really interesting because this is about ensuring the assets that are being created for carbon trading markets. So the sort of, if you want to offset your flight to Madrid, well, what's the mechanics of that? That somebody plants a forest somewhere, or somebody reduces the amount of carbon they're using to offset that carbon that your airplane emitted while you went on your holidays. That's, you have to, but what if that company that planted that forest went bust, or that forest burnt down? Then you're creating a really valuable asset that needs insurance, and it needs quite complicated insurance because it's sort of a bit of political risk, a bit of good old standard fire risk for some of these physical assets, but all sorts, but credit risk. So there's not actually a policy off the shelf that would really work for this. And again, of course, carbon credits, the value of them can fluctuate as well. So there's a bit of market risks. It's a bit like when you're doing, traditional. Like oil refinery insurance, that loss of profits part is really quite complicated because, of course, if you're a big enough oil refinery, it goes down and blows up or whatever, it goes offline for 2 years while you're rebuilding it. Then actually you can even put the price of oil up. Yeah. Or you put the price of refined products up because capacity has been reduced. So again, I'm really looking forward to that conversation because again, you think, you think, blah, 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 ESG, whatever. But actually, God, this is real. Of course, this is real. This is really going to happen. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's very important, again, to get those kind of things onto your podcast, for example. I think we had a long time ago now, we had Keita on as like an earlier stage version of themselves. I'd be really interested
it's very
to catch
smart
up
of you.
on there.
Well, it's really good. Yeah. Yes, it's one of those things you think, I wish I could do that with more. Because, obviously, I think the podcast medium is so good for that. It allows us to really get, and also, if we're the hosts, we can ask the slightly dumb questions. Yeah, but they're not dumb questions. Sort of, how does this work? All the things that are in the minds of the people who are listening to the podcast, we put ourselves in their shoes and listen to what the people are saying, and then react accordingly, and really sort of approximate that kind of conversation that you have in a bar with a friend that you trust. Yeah. Who's not going to go and run off and say, hey, Mark doesn't know anything about carbon insurance. They're not going to laugh at you, take you seriously, and actually run you through it because they really do know about how it works. And so I'm hoping that they'll do this with me because these people obviously really thought about this for a long period of time, and then they've got the funding, so they've really gone for it, and it's quite exciting.
And hopefully, somebody listening somewhere will trigger a thought and go, oh, you know what, I'm the risk manager for such and such, and they've been talking about this problem for ages, and we didn't know there was a solution. And through the power of podcasting, suddenly they'll be the pioneers of a new market.
Yeah, well, it's interesting for us as well. We interview fewer people on our show than you do. But there's the episodes that we do where we're talking about what we're seeing in the market and our perspectives on things and explaining stuff to listeners. But when we invite people on, it's a real benefit to be like genuinely curious as the interviewers around like, what is this? What are you doing? And where does it sit? How does it work? What are we trying to accomplish? And we can come into that with like authentic curiosity, which I think becomes a really interesting thing for listeners to hear because they too share curiosity around some of these sectors and things.
And I remember as a junior broker, when things are so siloed. how often can you actually just say, hey guys, can you just someone explain to me how this thing works? And after about 6 or 8 months, you suddenly feel a bit embarrassed, saying, well, I'm supposed to know about this by now. At what point are they going to say, this Geoghegan guy is the dumbest person you've ever hired because he actually asks these stupid questions, which there are no stupid questions. And so, again, the education part of podcasting, I think, is really valuable because, of course, you can just quietly listen to this thing and you can become the smartest person in that little, on your desk group. Quite quickly because you get to hear from all these experts and they're being asked hopefully quite sensible questions and being guided logically through a question and answer session that makes sense.
I think you probably also lead. I'd be interested to hear if you've had any moments like this or if anyone's reported to you afterwards that they've felt like this on your show. But if you compare it to a traditional interview where probably you wrote down the answers beforehand and marketing helped a lot, the podcast format gets your guests hopefully into quite a relaxed state where they can think freely about something and then be asked about things from angles maybe they hadn't thought of before, to the point where they might realize something about themselves or about their company or about the work they do that maybe doesn't come out in the ordinary day-to-day or in the marketing spiel, etc. So. And they just have like a eureka moment mid-show of like, I guess we are that, Mark. Thanks for asking.
Well, I suppose, yes, that's true. It's true. It works because obviously you do 20 questions, and this is to help them focus their minds ahead of time, and to get them comfortable that you're not there to sort of kill them or stitch them up or do something weird, and just so they can be ready and that people can be prepared. And sometimes that's the people surrounding the executive also, who are sort of gatekeepers to the executive. So you've got to play the game and make sure you get in the room with that person. But of course, when they answer question number one, I don't know what they're going to say. And that's the whole point of it. So you have to listen. So it's a conversation rather than just, if it's a news interview, for example, when you're a news reporter and you just got to go off write a news story. So this company's had its results and we've got 5 minutes with the CEO. We just ask 3 or 4, 5, 6 questions. As soon as you ask the question, you start writing the notes. These days now you'd probably listen to, you're recording an MP3 and then it will be transcribed. But you're listening, you're not interacting. Whereas in a podcast, you're having a conversation because they're saying, and you go, wow, that's really interesting. Suddenly you're into a stage of something that you're not on the 20 questions that you had. You're in somewhere else. And that's really good. And obviously, yes, and when you ask them something complicated and they talk for 4 or 5 minutes uninterrupted, then of course the job of an interviewer or of a journalist is to then take something really complicated they've just said and then say, and summarize it.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's like smashing an orange against a wall. And they'll say, no, it isn't really like that. It's actually like smashing a lemon against the wall or gently squeezing it. Yeah. And you go, oh, right. But then suddenly all our knowledge is explained. It's like, but that's, journalists is to sort of, supply the metaphors, supply the imagery to say, what is it like? The simile. What's it like? Our job is to help summarize, and we often, obviously, in order to doing that, we're summarizing and simplifying, and therefore oversimplifying. But that's fine, and then they can correct my oversimplification, and suddenly we get to this much more interesting understanding with a really grey area in between, and our understanding's just gone right up at that point, and that's where I know that this is so much better than me just talking to them and then writing an article. There's some little spark, something's happened that's interesting.
Yeah. I think and that's the thing that makes it something the listeners can sort of pick up and understand more easily as well. If you read or just talk to someone sort of who's an expert rambling on about something that they understand fundamentally, it's hard to digest it. But if it's in a conversation that other person's asking questions and sort of probing for analogies, etc., it allows that distillation of information to be a bit more sort of digestible, if you will. So I think it's a super helpful format.
Over time, being British, you don't want to be rude and you don't want to interrupt people. But I'm sort of try and interrupt people more, actually, just to say, because if they're losing me, if they're losing people, then you need to haul them back quickly before they go off into the stratosphere, and then maybe whoever's listening is actually going to turn the phone off or start listening to something else, actually, at that point. So yes, I've been working on my technique of trying to get over my own sort of politeness and interrupt people quickly if there's something that needs quickly clarifying. So, or did you mean this, or do you mean that?
Yeah.
So do you find, there we are, just slightly interrupted you.
But we should.
But I suppose, I mean, we're not that purist. I think we're quite relaxed about the way we do these sessions, but you could take podcasting to that extreme, I guess, where you're collaboratively trying to create something incredible to listen to. You know, I think we're more curious people who actually want to get to the bottom of things, but can a podcast be art? You know, can it be music to the listeners' ears, and that takes everyone involved, I guess.
There's definitely an art to it. I suppose it could be a live brainstorm or something. Yeah. Well, let's see. Let's see how we can elevate this to art.
Like the best 1 minute of podcasting in the world through the right voices.
There could be moments. There could be moments of magic, yes.
Moments of magic. Well, for all of you who listen to us but do not yet listen to Mark's podcast, we'll put a link in the notes and things. Voice of Insurance. Mark, absolute delight as always to have you on the show, and thank you for joining us.
And quick before I go, I couldn't remember the name of the satellite company. It's called ISI. So we should put a link to that episode. That's really good because that's the one. That's the Insurance Podcast episode you can listen to if you don't know anything about insurance.
Yeah,
and you're currently listening to a Reinsurance Podcast.
If you wonder why you're here. Perfect. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks for having me.